Everyone in the ballroom knew one rule that night. Nobody told Damian Brooks what to do. The most powerful man in the room had built his reputation on confidence, influence, and the ability to make decisions that moved millions of dollars with a single phone call. But on the evening of the city's most prestigious charity auction, one woman stepped forward and did something no one expected. She asked him to leave the stage. The Grand Sterling Ballroom in Manhattan was glowing beneath thousands of crystal lights as guests arrived for an event that had taken months of preparation. Business leaders, collectors, celebrities, and philanthropists filled the elegant space, ready to participate in an auction that would raise funds for children's healthcare programs across the country. Every detail mattered. Every minute mattered. Behind the beauty of the evening was a team of professionals working quietly to make sure everything happened perfectly. Among them was Jasmine Reed, a curvy black auction assistant known by her co-workers for one simple quality. She never ignored the details others overlooked. Jasmine was not the person standing under the spotlight. She was the person making sure the spotlight worked. She checked schedules, reviewed presentation times, organized guest movements, and confirmed that every speaker understood the order of the program. To many guests, she was just another member of the event staff. But to those who worked beside her, Jasmine was the person who protected the entire operation with patience and professionalism. Her belief was simple. A rule only mattered if it applied to everyone. That belief came from years of experience and from the lessons her grandmother had taught her while growing up in a small neighborhood outside Philadelphia. Respect was not something people earned through status. Respect was something people showed through actions. As the evening approached its opening ceremony, the atmosphere changed when Damian Brooks entered the ballroom. Conversations became quieter. People turned their heads. Even those who rarely showed admiration recognized his presence. Damian was known as a man who commanded attention without asking for it. His reputation reached far beyond business circles. Many people considered him untouchable because powerful people often surrounded him. The organizers quickly prepared to welcome him, assuming every part of the event could be adjusted for such an important guest. But Jasmine noticed something different. The opening ceremony was scheduled to begin at exactly 8 o'clock. The stage lights were not fully activated. The presenters were still preparing backstage. The official countdown was still running. Then Damian walked toward the stage. Several organizers noticed, but remained silent. They exchanged uncertain looks, waiting for someone else to respond. Nobody wanted to interrupt the man everyone came to impress. Jasmine looked at the schedule in her hand. She looked at the stage. She looked at the clock. Only 90 seconds remained before the official beginning. For a moment, she considered saying nothing. It would have been easier. Nobody would have blamed her for staying quiet. But Jasmine knew the purpose of her role. She was there to protect the event, not to protect herself from an uncomfortable moment. Taking a calm breath, she walked toward the stage. The room slowly noticed her movement. The conversations faded. The music seemed quieter. Jasmine climbed the small staircase and approached Damian with a respectful expression. She did not raise her voice. She did not challenge his importance. She simply said the words that caused the entire ballroom to freeze. "Sir, I need to ask you to step off the stage until the program officially begins." In that moment, hundreds of people waited to see what Damian Brooks would do next. The ballroom became completely silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Hundreds of guests watched as Jasmine Reed stood calmly beside the stage, waiting for Damian Brooks to respond. The situation lasted only a few seconds, but to everyone watching, it felt much longer. Many people expected frustration. They expected a sharp reaction from a man who was rarely questioned. They expected Jasmine to realize she had made a mistake. But Damian did not immediately speak. Instead, he looked around the room. He noticed the unfinished preparations behind the curtain. He noticed the event staff waiting for the official start time. He noticed Jasmine holding the schedule in her hand, not with fear, but with responsibility. The reason behind her request became clear. She was not trying to embarrass him. She was protecting the event. Slowly, Damian stepped away from the stage. The reaction from the audience was almost louder than words. Some guests exchanged surprised looks. Others whispered among themselves, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The woman many people had ignored a moment earlier had maintained the same standard for everyone in the room, including the most influential guest of the evening. Jasmine simply thanked him with a small nod and returned to her position near the event team. She did not celebrate. She did not look around for approval. To her, the situation was already finished. The schedule was back on track. The auction could begin. But for everyone else, something unexpected had happened. Damian Brooks, a man known for having control over almost every situation, had accepted a request without using his influence to change the outcome. As the opening ceremony began, people continued watching him carefully. They were curious about his reaction. Yet Damian appeared different from what they expected. He listened. He observed. He paid attention to the details happening around him. For the first time that evening, he was not thinking about how people responded to his presence. He was thinking about why Jasmine had been willing to speak when everyone else remained silent. During the first auction presentation, Damian noticed how Jasmine moved through the ballroom. She checked on volunteers, helped guests find their seats, and quietly solved small problems before they became larger distractions. She treated every person with the same level of patience. A nervous young volunteer received the same attention as an important donor. A confused guest received the same kindness as a business executive. Damian watched this carefully. He had spent years surrounded by people who adjusted their behavior based on power. People became more careful with their words when he entered a room. They agreed quickly. They avoided difficult conversations. Jasmine had done the opposite, but she had done it without disrespect. That difference stayed in his mind. Later in the evening, Damian approached one of the event organizers and asked about her. "How long has she worked here?" he asked. The organizer smiled. "Long enough for everyone to know that if Jasmine says something needs to be done, there is usually a very good reason." Damian looked across the ballroom, where Jasmine was reviewing the next part of the program. The room around her was filled with people chasing recognition, attention, and influence. Yet she seemed completely unaffected by any of it. She was focused only on doing her job well. For the first time in a long while, Damian found himself respecting someone not because of their position, wealth, or connections, but because of their principles. The night continued, but one thought remained with him. The woman who asked him to leave the stage had not challenged his power. She had reminded him what responsibility looked like. The morning after the auction, the story of what happened inside the grand Sterling ballroom traveled faster than anyone expected. Guests who had witnessed the moment shared different versions of the event. Some focused on the powerful man who had stepped away from the stage. Others focused on the woman who had the confidence to speak when everyone else remained quiet. But behind the conversations and opinions, Jasmine Reed returned to her normal routine. She arrived at the event office before most of the staff, placed her coffee beside her schedule, and began preparing reports from the previous evening. There were no signs that she had experienced a moment that many people considered unforgettable. To Jasmine, it was simply part of her responsibility. She had never wanted attention. She had never wanted recognition. She only wanted to make sure every event she helped organize reflected the same fairness she believed in. Her coworkers noticed that nothing about her behavior changed. She still helped new assistants understand their tasks. She still reviewed every detail carefully. She still treated every person with the same patience, whether they were setting up chairs or managing important partnerships. That consistency was what made people trust her. Meanwhile, Damian Brooks spent the next few days thinking about the auction more than he expected. He had experienced difficult negotiations, challenging decisions, and moments where entire companies depended on his judgment. Yet a simple request from an auction assistant had stayed in his mind. He kept returning to the same question. Why had Jasmine been different from everyone else around him? Damian was used to people adjusting their behavior because of his reputation. Some wanted opportunities. Some wanted approval. Some simply avoided disagreement. But Jasmine had no hidden request. She had no reason to impress him. She had protected a standard because she believed it was right. That honesty made a stronger impression than any compliment he had received. Wanting to understand more, Damian contacted the foundation chairman and asked about Jasmine's work history. He expected to hear that she was simply a talented event employee. Instead, he discovered a pattern that surprised him. Jasmine had spent years protecting the quality of every event she managed. She had stopped mistakes before they reached guests. She had supported younger employees when they lacked confidence. She had quietly taken responsibility when others looked for someone to blame. Yet she rarely accepted praise for those actions. The chairman explained that Jasmine believed successful events were built by teams, not individuals. She does not try to be the most important person in the room, he said. She tries to make sure everyone can do their best work. Damien listened carefully. Those words remained with him long after the conversation ended. Later that week, Damien visited the foundation office for the first time without a formal business agenda. He wanted to see the environment Jasmine worked in every day. From a distance, he watched her guide a group of new assistants through preparation for another event. She explained procedures clearly and answered questions without making anyone feel embarrassed. Her leadership was quiet, but everyone followed her because they trusted her. Damien realized something that surprised him. Jasmine had never tried to challenge his position. She had never tried to prove she was stronger than him. She had simply shown that integrity did not depend on status. In a world where many people measured importance by wealth, influence, and recognition, Jasmine measured it by responsibility. And that was the quality Damien found himself respecting most. The days following the auction brought a quiet shift that few people noticed at first. While guests continued discussing the unexpected moment at the Grand Sterling Ballroom, Damien Brooks was focused on something much deeper than public attention. He had spent years believing that leadership meant having the final answer, making the fastest decision, and carrying the responsibility alone. But one evening, standing in his private office overlooking the city lights, he found himself thinking about a woman who had never tried to impress him. Jasmine Reed had not demanded respect. She had earned it through the way she carried herself. That realization stayed with him because it challenged something he had accepted for a long time. Damien had built an empire where people often measured success by influence and control. He knew how to negotiate large agreements, manage complex operations, and make decisions under pressure. Yet he began to wonder whether he had forgotten the importance of listening. The following week, Damien requested another meeting with the foundation chairman. This time, he did not ask about donations or business opportunities. He asked about the people behind the organization. He wanted to understand how a team could become so dedicated that every person, from volunteers to coordinators, worked with the same level of commitment. The chairman smiled when Jasmine's name came up again. She has always been like that, he explained. She believes every detail matters because every person affected by the event matters. Damien listened carefully. He realized that Jasmine's strength was not based on having authority over others. Her influence came from making people feel valued. Later that afternoon, Damien returned to the foundation office. This time, he did not arrive as the most important guest in the building. He arrived as someone who wanted to learn. He watched Jasmine reviewing schedules with the event team. A young assistant approached her with a mistake in a preparation document. Instead of criticizing the person, Jasmine calmly explained how to fix it and why the detail mattered. The assistant left the conversation more confident than before. Damien noticed that moment. Many leaders corrected mistakes by focusing on the problem. Jasmine focused on helping people grow beyond the problem. That difference stayed with him. As the afternoon continued, Damien saw another example of her character. A delivery arrived later than expected, creating pressure for the staff. Jasmine did not blame anyone. She reorganized the schedule, communicated with the team, and found a solution without creating unnecessary tension. Everyone around her remained calm because she remained calm. For Damien, it was a lesson he had never expected to learn. True leadership was not always about being the person everyone followed because of position. Sometimes it was about being the person everyone trusted because of character. Before leaving, Damien approached Jasmine. "I have been thinking about what happened that night," he said. Jasmine looked up from her documents and listened. "I know you were only doing your job," Damien continued, "but I want you to know that most people would have chosen the easier option." Jasmine gave a small smile. The easier option is not always the right one. Damien nodded slowly. Those simple words carried more weight than a long speech. As he walked away from the office, he understood that Jasmine had shown him something many powerful people forget. A person's value is not determined by the attention they receive. It is revealed by what they choose to do when no one is watching. 1 month later, the foundation hosted a private appreciation luncheon for the volunteers, coordinators, and staff who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make the charity auction a success. Unlike the glamorous gala, this gathering was simple and sincere. There were no television cameras, no famous guests seeking attention, and no reporters waiting outside the entrance. The room was filled instead with folding presentation boards covered in photographs from past events, handwritten thank you notes from families who had benefited from the Foundation's programs, and conversations between people who rarely stood in front of an audience. Jasmine Reed arrived early, just as she always did. Before taking her own seat, she adjusted place cards, confirmed the lunch schedule, and helped a nervous volunteer prepare a short presentation. She believed every event deserved the same care, whether it welcomed 500 donors or 50 coworkers. When everything was finally ready, she quietly chose a chair near the back of the room, hoping to enjoy the afternoon without becoming the center of attention. A few minutes before the ceremony began, another unexpected guest entered through the main doors. Damian Brooks walked inside without security surrounding him and without any announcement from the organizers. Conversations immediately softened as people recognized him, wondering why someone with his influence had attended a gathering intended only for the staff. Several board members hurried toward him, offering the reserved seat at the front of the room. Damian thanked them politely but declined. Instead, he selected an ordinary chair among the employees. The chairman welcomed everyone before speaking about teamwork, dedication, and the people whose efforts often remained invisible to the public. As the ceremony approached its conclusion, Damian slowly stood and asked whether he might say a few words. The room fell silent. Jasmine looked up with quiet curiosity, assuming he intended to speak about the Foundation's future projects. Instead, Damian walked to the podium, paused for a brief moment, and looked across the audience until his eyes found Jasmine. "Several weeks ago," he began, "many people watched an auction assistant ask me to leave a stage." A ripple of surprised smiles spread through the room before disappearing into complete silence. "Some people thought she embarrassed me," Damian continued. "The truth is much simpler. She protected the integrity of an event that deserved fairness more than it deserved my convenience." Every person in the audience turned toward Jasmine. She remained still, clearly uncomfortable with becoming the focus of the afternoon. Damian continued speaking with complete sincerity. "Power becomes dangerous when it expects exceptions. Character becomes valuable when it refuses to create them." Jasmine Reed reminded me that leadership begins with respecting the same standards we ask everyone else to follow. The chairman smiled proudly while several volunteers quietly nodded in agreement. Damian then invited Jasmine to join him at the front of the room. She hesitated for only a moment before walking toward the podium with the same calm expression she carried every day. When she reached him, Damian extended his hand, not as a symbolic gesture for the audience, but as a genuine expression of gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for treating me like every other guest." Jasmine returned the handshake with a warm smile. "That was never difficult," she replied softly. "The rules were already written before either of us walked into the ballroom." For a brief moment, nobody applauded because everyone understood they had witnessed something much more meaningful than recognition. They had watched humility meet integrity without pride standing between them. Then the room rose together in a long, heartfelt standing ovation that neither Damian nor Jasmine had expected, proving that the greatest respect is never demanded. It is quietly earned. After the appreciation luncheon, something unexpected began happening inside the organizations connected to Damian Brooks. The change was not announced in newspapers or discussed during public interviews. It happened quietly, through small decisions that gradually transformed the way people worked together. Damian had spent years building a reputation around confidence and control, but now he started paying attention to something he had often overlooked: the voices of the people around him. During executive meetings, he began asking questions before offering solutions. He invited employees from different departments to share concerns and ideas. He encouraged people to explain problems without worrying that disagreement would be seen as disrespect. At first, many employees were surprised. They were used to leaders who wanted quick answers and complete agreement. But over time, they realized Damian was not asking for opinions as a formality. He was genuinely listening. The lesson Jasmine Reed had shown him during the auction continued influencing his decisions. A strong organization was not built by one powerful person making every choice. It was built by many people feeling responsible for the success of the whole team. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued doing what she had always done. She did not follow the changes happening around Damian or seek recognition for inspiring them. She remained focused on her work with the foundation, preparing events, supporting staff members, and helping new assistants understand the importance of professionalism. Her influence came from consistency, not attention. One afternoon, Damien visited the foundation office while the team was preparing for another major fundraiser. Instead of entering through the main reception area with special arrangements, he arrived like any other visitor. He waited until the staff member at the front desk finished helping someone else before introducing himself. The employee immediately recognized him and apologized for making him wait. Damien simply smiled and said there was no need to apologize. Jasmine happened to witness the moment from across the office. She noticed something different about him. The man who once represented unquestioned authority had learned the value of patience. Later that day, Damien and Jasmine reviewed the progress of the upcoming event. Their conversation was professional, but there was a sense of mutual understanding between them. "Do you realize how much has changed since that night?" Damien asked. Jasmine looked at the plans in front of her and smiled. "A lot has changed because people were willing to learn." Damien nodded. He understood that her answer was typical of her. She never placed herself at the center of the story. She always focused on the lesson. Most people would have used that moment to gain attention, Damien said. You used it to protect something bigger than yourself. Jasmine looked thoughtful before replying. A person does not need to be powerful to make a difference. They just need to care about what is right. Those words stayed with Damien long after their conversation ended. He realized that the greatest lessons often came from unexpected places and unexpected people. The world often noticed those who stood in front of the crowd, but sometimes the people working quietly behind the scenes carried the strongest values. As months passed, the foundation became known not only for successful events, but also for the culture of respect created within its walls. Employees felt valued. Volunteers felt appreciated. Guests noticed the difference. Nobody could point to one single moment when everything changed. It happened through countless small choices made by people who believed fairness mattered. And at the center of that transformation was a simple lesson from one auction assistant who reminded a powerful man that true leadership begins with humility. The question Damien Brooks had been avoiding finally came up during a quiet evening at the foundation office. After months of watching his teams change and seeing the impact of new leadership habits, he found himself returning to the same memory again and again. Not the applause after the charity luncheon, not the public recognition, not the attention from guests who had witnessed the transformation. The moment he remembered most clearly was the quiet conversation before everything changed. A woman standing beside a stage had looked at him without fear, without anger, and without the desire to prove anything. She had simply believed that the responsibility of her position mattered more than the importance of his name. One evening, after another successful fundraiser, Damien asked Jasmine Reed a question that had stayed with him for months. "Can I ask you something?" he said as they reviewed the final reports from the event. Jasmine looked up and nodded. "Why were you not afraid that night?" The room around them was quiet. Outside the office windows, the city lights reflected across the glass, creating a calm atmosphere after a long day of preparation. Jasmine thought about the question carefully. She did not answer immediately because she understood what Damien was really asking. He was not asking about confidence. He was asking about courage. "I was not thinking about you as someone powerful," she finally said. "I was thinking about my responsibility." Damien listened closely. Jasmine continued. "When you are responsible for something, your first question should not be, 'Who is this person?' Your first question should be, 'What is the right thing to do?'" Those words remained between them for several seconds. Damien had spent years surrounded by people who evaluated every situation based on influence. They considered who was important, who had connections, and who could create opportunities. Jasmine had looked at the same situation through a completely different perspective. She had seen a responsibility that needed to be protected. That was all. Most people would have considered the consequences for themselves, Damien said. Jasmine smiled gently. Everyone thinks about consequences. The difference is deciding which consequences matter more. Damien looked down at the reports in front of him. He understood that this was the reason her actions had affected him so deeply. Jasmine had not defeated him that night. She had not challenged him. She had simply shown him a standard he had forgotten to apply to himself. In the months since the auction, Damien had learned that leadership was not about avoiding uncomfortable moments. It was about creating an environment where honesty could exist. He had once believed that powerful leaders needed to have all the answers. Now he believed powerful leaders needed the humility to listen. As the conversation ended, Damien thanked Jasmine for something beyond the event itself. He thanked her for reminding him that a person's position did not determine the value of their voice. Jasmine accepted the gratitude with the same calm expression she always carried. She did not see herself as someone who changed a powerful man. She saw herself as someone who stayed true to her principles. Later that evening, Damien walked through the empty ballroom where their unexpected journey had started. The stage was quiet. The lights were dim. There were no guests watching and no cameras recording. Yet the lesson felt stronger than ever. The most important moments in life were often the ones where nobody was expecting anything from you. That was where character appeared. And Damien Brooks finally understood that real strength was not shown by how many people followed you. It was shown by whether you were willing to listen when someone told you the truth. The next charity auction became the event everyone in the organization was watching closely. Months earlier, the same ballroom had been filled with uncertainty when a quiet auction assistant made a decision that surprised everyone. Now, the preparation process carried a different feeling. The team was not simply organizing another successful evening. They were creating an event based on the values they had learned to protect. Every schedule was reviewed carefully. Every guest received the same information. Every member of the staff understood that professionalism mattered more than status. When Damien Brooks arrived that evening, many people expected the same level of attention he had always received. They expected special arrangements, private accommodations, and a different set of expectations. But Damien surprised them. He arrived early and waited for the event coordinator to confirm the next steps. He followed the same procedures as every other guest. He accepted the same instructions. He stood in the same line. He did not ask anyone to change the process because of his position. Several employees noticed the difference immediately. Some remembered the night when Jasmine Reed had approached him on the stage. They remembered the uncertainty in the room and the question everyone had silently asked. What would a powerful man do when someone refused to make an exception for him? The answer had become one of the most important lessons they carried forward. Damien had not responded with pride. He had responded with understanding. Before the event began, Jasmine walked through the ballroom, checking the final details. She noticed Damien waiting near the entrance instead of being moved ahead of the schedule. For a moment, she stopped and watched quietly. She realized the change was not about one dramatic moment anymore. It had become part of who he was. Damien noticed her and smiled. "Everything ready?" he asked. Jasmine looked around the ballroom and nodded. "Almost. We still have a few details to check." Damien smiled because that answer was exactly what he expected from her. She was never satisfied with appearances alone. She cared about the work behind them. As the auction started, the evening moved smoothly. Guests praised the organization, the staff worked confidently, and the atmosphere reflected the preparation behind every decision. During the main presentation, Damien was invited to speak. He walked onto the stage only after receiving the official introduction from the host. He looked across the audience and paused before beginning. "A year ago, I learned something important in this very room," he said. "I learned that respect is not created by expecting people to adjust around you. Respect is created when you are willing to stand beside others under the same standards." The audience listened carefully. Damien continued, "The person who taught me that lesson was not someone with the most influence in the room. She was someone who understood the importance of doing the right thing, even when it was uncomfortable." His eyes moved toward Jasmine. She remained quiet, just as she always had. She did not need recognition to prove her value. Damien understood that now. After the event ended, guests left with positive memories. But the most meaningful moment happened after the lights began to dim. Jasmine and Damien stood near the stage where everything had started. The room was peaceful. There were no cameras, no applause, and no expectations. Just two people who had learned something from each other. Damien looked at the empty stage and smiled. "Funny how a place can change meaning," he said. Jasmine looked around the room. "Maybe places do not change. Maybe people do." Damien nodded because he knew she was right. The stage had never been the important part. The important part was the choice made on it. And that choice had reminded everyone that true leadership is not about standing above others. It is about having the humility to stand with them. Several years passed, and thousands of people attended charity events organized by the foundation without ever realizing they were walking through a place shaped by one quiet decision. New volunteers learned the procedures. New coordinators accepted responsibilities. Distinguished guests arrived from across the country. Every event appeared effortless from the audience. Yet behind every successful evening stood a culture built on fairness instead of favoritism. The story itself gradually became part of the organization's history. New employees occasionally heard experienced staff mention the evening when an auction assistant reminded a powerful guest that the rules belonged to everyone. Some believed the story had become larger with time. Others wondered whether it had really happened. Those who had witnessed it never argued. They simply smiled because they remembered the silence that filled the ballroom before everything changed. Damian Brooks continued supporting charitable causes, but the lesson he carried reached far beyond fundraising. Inside his companies, he encouraged leaders to earn trust before expecting loyalty. Promotions increasingly recognized integrity alongside performance. Employees discovered that honest questions were welcomed instead of avoided. The culture did not become perfect, but it became stronger because people believed fairness was more than a slogan displayed on a conference room wall. Damian often reflected on how one unexpected conversation had redirected his understanding of leadership. He realized that influence could open doors, but character determined what happened after those doors opened. Meanwhile, Jasmine Reed remained exactly who she had always been. She never sought recognition for changing anyone's perspective. She continued arriving early, checking every schedule, encouraging new staff members, and solving problems before most people even noticed they existed. Her greatest satisfaction never came from applause. It came from watching events succeed. Because everyone worked together with mutual respect. Younger assistants often asked how she stayed calm during difficult situations. Jasmine always gave the same answer. If you remember why you are responsible for something, the right decision usually becomes much easier to find. Those simple words guided a new generation of professionals who would never experience the original moment themselves, but would continue living its lesson. One quiet evening, after another successful charity gala, Damian and Jasmine stood once more inside the now empty Grand Sterling Ballroom. The lights above the stage had dimmed, the guests had gone home, and the staff quietly packed away the final pieces of equipment. Damian looked toward the stage where their story had begun and smiled. People probably think that night changed because someone important walked away from the stage, he said softly. Jasmine looked at the empty rows of chairs before answering. No, it changed because someone decided that doing the right thing mattered more than being comfortable. Damian nodded slowly. He understood that after all those years, the lesson had never belonged to either of them alone. It belonged to everyone willing to place integrity above convenience. As they walked toward the exit, neither person looked back. There was no need. The stage had already served its purpose. It had transformed an ordinary evening into a lasting reminder that true leadership is measured by humility, true respect is earned through fairness, and true influence begins the moment a person chooses principles over privilege. Long after the auction ended and the applause faded into memory, people no longer remembered the amount of money raised or the names printed in the event program. They remembered the quiet courage of a Curvy Auction Assistant, the humility of a Mafia Boss who chose to listen instead of demand, and the simple truth that dignity belongs equally to every person who walks into the room.